In today's video, I'm going to dive into the career of one of the most beloved British fighters to ever live, Ricky the Hitman Hatton. From a council estate in Manchester to the bright lights of Las Vegas, Hatton lived through a boxing fantasy. His legions of fans would travel wherever he went and produce some of the best atmospheres the sport has ever seen. I mean, have you ever heard a weigh-in in boxing sound anything like this? But how good was Hatton really? Was he ever truly elite, or is he massively overrated? Well, let's find out and answer the ultimate question. How good was Ricky the Hitman Hatton actually? As a young kid, Hatton was naturally talented at multiple sports, such as football and kickboxing, but he would soon realise he was best suited to the sweet science of boxing, and after watching Eubank vs Ben in Old Trafford, he felt inspired by what he saw. Hatton would blitz the competition with his speed and aggression, which would later become synonymous with his fighting style when he became a professional. During his time spent as an amateur, Hatton would win 8 national titles and the ABA super lightweight title. After a successful national level amateur career, Hatton would retire with a final record of 73 wins and 7 losses. He would turn over to the professional ranks in 1997 at 18 years old and sign with Frank Warren's Queensberry Promotions. Hatton made a perfect start to his professional career and took out his first 10 opponents with relative ease. His first test of his career would come against fellow undefeated fighter Tommy Peacock for the vacant Central Area Super Lightweight title. Hatton showed a brilliant work rate from the first bell and unsettled his opponent with fast and sharp punches. In the second round, Hatton knocked Peacock down with a well-timed left hook. Peacock got back up, but Hatton showed great killer instinct and knocked him down once more, and the fight was over. Hatton stayed busy and racked up 5 more wins in the year and looked comfortable in each of them. The young Mancunian was gaining momentum and starting to get acclaim from those in the sport. Hatton would suffer his first crisis moment of his career in his 20th fight against Gilbert Quiros in Detroit. Hatton had to battle with a terrible cut above his left eye in the first round. However, Hatton proved he was able to handle adversity against a puncher like Quiros, and he would show off his world-class body punching by landing a crushing left hand to the body of Quiros, which ended the fight. In his next fight, Hatton would compete for the WBA Intercontinental title against Giuseppe Lauri. It was a good test and a hard-fought fight. The Italian gave Hatton more trouble than anyone Hatton had faced thus far. However, Hatton would ultimately show his class. He used his constant pressure and great body punching to win all the rounds, and in the 5th round he would close the show for good after landing a series of left hands, which made the referee stop the fight. Hatton would get his biggest test of his career so far in his next fight against experienced Brit John Thaxton for the vacant British super lightweight title. The same issues that have plagued his previous fights would appear in this one, as in the very first round Hatton was cut above his left eye, which was worse than his previous cuts. Thaxton would repeatedly target the area of the cut, but Hatton remained composed and battled on to win on points over 12 rounds. This was the first time Hatton had been taken past 6 rounds in his pro career, and it was a great learning experience for him. Hatton's breakthrough moment in his career came in his next fight against experienced Canadian Tony Pep for the vacant WBU super lightweight title. Now, for those who aren't aware of what the WBU title is, it's essentially a fringe belt. It's not recognised as a true world title, as it's not from a major sanctioning body like, for example, the WBC. It's just another pointless and confusing belt which makes the sport harder to follow for new fans. It's got a similar reputation to the IBO right now, where many do not consider it a world title. Same issues arose yet again in this fight for Hatton as Pep opened a cut above Hatton's right eye in the second round. Hatton responded well with a barrage of punches, and would eventually force Pep onto one knee twice in round 3, and would continue to punish Pep and put him down for the 3rd and final time in round 4. It was a very dominant display from the Hitman, and he was now the new WBU champion. This is where Hatton started to become a star in British boxing. He would defend his WBU title multiple times, usually in front of a packed out Manchester arena, which became his stomping ground throughout his career. Frank Warren was developing Ricky into a superstar of British boxing. Hatton was one of those rare fighters to cross over to the mainstream. He was charismatic, had a very fan-friendly style, and above all, he was super relatable to the working class. As for these title defences, well, it has to be said, they weren't the greatest in terms of opposition, and that's because the WBU didn't require their champions to fight mandatories, meaning Warren and Hatton could essentially choose their opponents. Regardless, Ricky was still selling out arenas, and the fans were buying into him. Not all of his defences went smoothly, however, and he struggled against some domestic level and over-the-hill fighters. One of his most notable defences came against Irishman Eamon McGee, who was a very talented amateur but more of a domestic level fighter in the pros. This was easily the hardest fight of Hatton's career so far. McGee knocked Hatton down with a right hook in the first 40 seconds of the first round, which was the first time Hatton was dropped in his pro career. Hatton, to his credit, would respond well, but it was a dominant round for McGee. The Irishman continued to have success in the second round and had Hatton in big trouble once more. In round 4, Hatton would sustain a cut under his right eye, but he would respond by working to the body of McGee. Hatton's constant pressure was starting to get to the Irishman, and he was finding success with his flurry of shots, while McGee was starting to look tired. It was a highly competitive fight, but after 12 rounds of entertaining action, Hatton would win by unanimous decision. Hatton's trainer Billy Graham would say after the fight that this was Hatton's toughest fight so far, and he wasn't wrong. Another notable defense of Hatton's WBU title came in his 32nd fight against former IBF world champion Cool Vince Phillips. Phillips started the fight well, looking to avoid the aggression of Hatton with good counters, and he managed to open a cut above Hatton's right eye which bled profusely as the round ended. Phillips continued to target the cut of Hatton, but Hatton's fast-paced, in-your-face style was starting to overwhelm the former champion. Phillips would eventually get a cut of his own following a head clash in round 2. Hatton was really starting to get into a groove and making Phillips's cuts even worse. He was also showing very creative body punching, striking from all different angles. Hatton did his best to try get the stoppage using relentless pressure and landing from body to head, but he wouldn't get the finish and instead settled for a unanimous decision. Although Hatton clearly won on points, it was still a worrying performance considering that Phillips was past his prime at this point, yet still stunned Hatton a bunch of times and gave him problems. After 6 more successful defences of his WBU title, Hatton would take on his first truly world-class opponent, that being one of the pound-for-pound best boxers on the planet at the time, Australian, IBF and ring champion Kostya Tszyu. Hatton went into the fight as an underdog, but would produce a career-defining performance on the biggest night of his life. Tszyu started the fight slow, something he was known for doing, while Hatton set the pace from the opening round. Hatton did well to negate the Aussie's big right hand and punished him on the inside. The champion would land some decent counter shots at times in the fight, but he was getting outworked and outlanded by the hitman. The fight started to become a messy affair in the later rounds. In round 7, Tszyu knocked Hatton down with an illegal low blow, and in round 9, Hatton would do the same, but with much more impact, which had the champion in some distress. In the 10th round, Hatton was showing his quality. He was coming in and out of range and connecting with multiple big right hands and landing hurtful punches on the inside. The fight was highly competitive throughout, but as round 11 ended, the champion decided not to come out of his corner for the last round and quit. Despite him doing well up until that point, and in some people's eyes even winning, Kostya Tszyu just decided it wasn't for him anymore. Hatton was now the new IBF super lightweight champion of the world. This night in Manchester propelled Hatton into superstardom and truly announced him on the world stage. Hatton would make his first and only defense of his IBF title in a unification fight against WBA champion Carlos Mauser. Hatton put on a very dominant performance. He had Mauser in constant trouble, landing many ripping body shots, and he showed a great chin in the fight. The most trouble that Hatton really had in the fight was the 2 cuts that he received. Yeah, take a shot every time I say Hatton was cut in this video. Hatton was first cut above his left eye in round 1 from a head clash, which caused blood to stream from above his eye, and in the 3rd round he was cut again by another head clash. But this time it was above Hatton's other eye. In the 9th round, Hatton would cap off what was a great performance by ending the fight for good following a lovely left hook. After a successful year that saw Hatton capture 2 world titles, he'd be named the 2005 Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year. Hatton decided not to continue at super lightweight and would relinquish his IBF title on the 29th of March 2006. He would then move up to the very exciting welterweight division in a bid to become a 2-weight world champion. Welcoming him to 147 would be WBA champion Luis Collazo. Hatton couldn't start the fight any better as he knocked Collazo down with a left hook in the first few seconds of round 1. Collazo got back up quickly and managed to survive the round. The early knockdown made the fight appear to be a more straightforward one, but the fight was anything but comfortable for Hatton and would soon become one of the hardest fights of his entire career. Hatton, as usual, looked to fight up close, but the New Yorker showed good counterpunching, which was causing Hatton problems. Collazo had a huge 12th round that saw him snap the head back of Hatton with combinations. Collazo landed more damaging blows which had Hatton hurt and made him wobble, but Hatton managed to survive the round. After 12 rounds, Hatton would win by unanimous decision in what was a very rough and brutal fight. Hatton would then come back down to 140 to take on Juan Urango for the IBF and vacant IBO super lightweight titles. Hatton was clearly the much quicker out of the two and was outboxing Urango for the first 4 rounds. Urango had his best round in the 5th, landing some big body shots on the hitman, but Hatton would adapt and take the following round. Hatton was the busier and more accurate fighter, and was able to beat Urango to the punch in a lot of their exchanges. It was a hard fight, but after 12 rounds of action, Hatton would win by unanimous decision, winning all but 1 round on all 3 judges' scorecards. Hatton had now regained his IBF world title, as well as adding the IBO to his collection. He would then take on former lightweight champion of the world, Jose Luis Castillo. Hatton made a positive start to the fight, swarming all over Castillo and landing the better shots in the first couple rounds. In the 3rd round, Castillo was letting his hands go and landed 2 left hooks to the body that had Hatton visibly hurt. In the 4th round, the Mexican was deducted a point for repeated low blows, and once the action resumed, Hatton would land a savage left hook to the body, which put Castillo down and had the Mexican in agony. He was unable to get back up to his feet and was counted out. Hatton would then go back up to 147 to enter in a super fight with the best fighter on the planet, Floyd Money Mayweather. The two would meet in the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas in what was one of the biggest welterweight fights in some time. It was a spectacle to behold, with thousands and thousands of Hatton supporters making the trip across the pond. And watching the fight back, you'd honestly think it was taking place in Manchester, with the level of just noise from the Hatton supporters. Hatton started the fight in his usual fast and aggressive way, and found success early, landing a left jab in round 1, which knocked Mayweather off balance. The constant pressure from Hatton was causing Mayweather some issues, but the sheer class of Mayweather would prevail, as he would make the necessary adjustments. In the 3rd round, Mayweather landed a right hand that cut Hatton above the right eye. In round 6, referee Joe Cortez took a point away from Hatton after he looked to have hit Mayweather on the back of the head, while Mayweather was rested between the ropes. But in reality, Hatton had hit the rope rather than Mayweather's head, although Hatton was warned multiple times for punches behind the head. In round 10, while Hatton was marching forward, Floyd countered him with a perfectly timed left hook, which sent Hatton headfirst into the ring Toblerone. Hatton got back up to his feet and showed tremendous bravery to still come forward and attack Floyd. However, Floyd would end the fight for good following a combination of heavy shots, which dropped the hitman once more and the referee called it off. Hatton had now suffered his first career loss, which was no shame considering it came against a prime Floyd Mayweather. This fight did show that despite Hatton clearly being a top-level operator, he just wasn't a truly elite fighter. He did his best with a limited skill set, but like I mention a lot on this channel, the fighters that are truly the best on the planet have many gears that they can go up in a fight, whereas fighters like Hatton can only go so far. Despite a disappointing loss in Vegas, Hatton's support couldn't have been any stronger, and his next fight down at super lightweight against IBO champion Juan Lazcano saw him fight in front of 55,000 fans at the Etihad, home of his beloved Manchester City Football Club. Hatton boxed well, controlled the range using his jab effectively, and was dominating a lot of the exchanges. In round 8, Hatton took a left hook to the chin that wobbled him, but he managed to survive. In round 10, Hatton was hurt once again by a left hook, but he showed he was able to handle the adversity once again, and after 12 rounds of action, Hatton would deservedly win by unanimous decision. Hatton would be back in Las Vegas in his next fight to take on former IBF light welterweight champion Paulie Malignaggi. For this fight, Hatton made a major change in camp, ending his 11-year working relationship with his trainer Billy Graham. Instead, Hatton would be trained by Floyd Mayweather Sr. Hatton would outclass and humble the cocky New Yorker. He had Paulie hurt in round 2 with a huge right hand that made the American hold on for the remainder of the round. Hatton got into his rhythm and dominated the remainder of the fight, and after plenty of punishment, Malignaggi's trainer, Buddy McGirt, would throw in the towel. Paulie probably only won 2 rounds, if that. He was being beaten up, and it was all one-way traffic. It was one of the best performances of Hatton's entire career. After 2 rebuilding fights following the disappointing Mayweather loss, Hatton was ready to enter in another mega fight against an all-time great in Manny Pacquiao. This fight was pure nightmare fuel for any Hatton fan. Hatton was simply outclassed on the night. In round 1, Hatton was knocked down heavily by a right hand. He slowly rose to his feet, but he was still hurt, and he would be totally overwhelmed by the blistering hand speed of Pacquiao, and was dropped once again. Luckily for Hatton, the second knockdown came just at the end of the round. Unfortunately for Hatton, in round 2, things would go from bad to worse, as he was brutally knocked out by a pinpoint left hook from Pacquiao. Understandably, Hatton would take this loss very badly. Being brutally knocked out in front of thousands of your own fans is quite a bitter pill to swallow, and he would take years out of the sport, even announcing his retirement in 2011. However, in 2012, 3 years on from his nightmarish defeat against Pacquiao, he would make his return to the ring against Vyacheslav Senchenko. Hatton wanted to have closure on his career and see if he had anything left to give. Unfortunately, it turned out that Hatton had nothing left. Senchenko used his superior height and reach effectively and controlled the majority of the action. Senchenko landed a hook to the body that sent Hatton to the floor, and Hatton was counted out by the referee. Immediately after the fight, Hatton announced his retirement from the sport, and this time it was for real. Hatton would retire with a final record of 45 wins, 3 losses, becoming a 2-weight world champion, as well as winning the Central Area and British super lightweight titles. Not bad for a guy from a council estate in Manchester. So with all that said, how good was Ricky the Hitman Hatton actually? Without a doubt, Hatton was a world level operator, able to compete with very high level guys, as shown with his win over Tszyu. However, he was a good few levels below the truly elite guys of his time, such as Mayweather and Pacquiao. He was also quite one-dimensional at times. He would look to come forward and want to maul his opponents, and if that didn't work, then well, he would just struggle. But his main strategy of fighting was largely effective throughout most of his career. He was a solid pressure fighter with outstanding body punching, quick feet, great balance and good power. As for his resume, his 3 best wins of his career are, in my opinion, Tszyu, Jose Luis Castillo and Paulie Malignaggi. In his 48 fight long career, there were plenty of weak opposition, which was mainly during his time defending his WBU belt, which I mentioned earlier didn't require him to fight mandatories. So yeah, his resume is lacking in my opinion. He wasn't one of the elite guys, but he was still a world level operator in his prime, capable of beating some top level fighters. He probably could have had an even better career had he not gone up to welterweight, which I understand that he wanted to chase the big paydays and the mega fights against Pacquiao and Mayweather, but I always felt he was better suited at 140. And don't get me started on how many times he ballooned up in weight out of camp. Overall, the Hitman was a fantastic servant to British boxing, and definitely up there as one of the best fighters to come out of the UK in the modern era. He was an exciting and charismatic fighter who produced many memorable nights in his career. Let me know what you make of Ricky Hatton's career in the comments below, and also comment what fighter you'd like me to cover next. As always, thanks very much for watching.